think it's live. I ain't sure. Well, we'll just see. Greetings, I am Swifto, and this is Story Time with I. I did a live stream yesterday which was a complete disaster. It was a stupid joke thing, and one of the things I was trying to do in that live stream, I thought maybe I could just use the whole hot tub thing as an excuse, as a sort of stupid joke, and then in the meantime read a book, because everybody does games. Well, not everybody. Most people on YouTube do games and stuff, and I thought, fuck that, everyone does that. Let's do something different. Let's do something extremely boring and read a book. Yes, so we're not doing the whole games thing. Nah, we'll do that later. But this is just an experiment to see who shows up and what nasty things they say to me about my stupid idea. And yes, as I'm sure no one's watching this, I didn't even announce it on YouTube, but if you are, today I am going to be reading, probably very badly, Grimm's fairy tales, Brothers Grimm that is. So, why don't we just start with this delightful collection of stories, which I haven't read this book yet, but obviously I'm familiar with the stories. And we'll just get into it, shall we? That is the contents. Introduction then. Should I read the introduction or should I just skip to the stories? I'm not sure. Just take a wee sip. Yes. Refresh the throat slightly, or whatever. So here we go with this crazy stupid idea of mine. Let's do something extremely boring and read a book, as I've already mentioned. Did I mention that? I tend to repeat myself, and sometimes I repeat myself because I repeat myself. I apologise for that. Try not to repeat myself. So the introduction to this amazing book. Isn't it great artwork, by the way? We start with a guy with a big nose. I think it's like a troll or something, and he's got some sort of feathery thing coming out of his head, which must be slightly annoying. Is it coming out of his head or is it in his back? I ain't too sure. That probably didn't show up because of the light. Hang on. You see the wee troll guy there? Yeah. It reminds me of me in some ways. Trolling people by reading a book on Twitch. Anyway, let's just get started. And you can hear my wonderful reading voice, which going to stumble over lots of words. So that should be fun. Remember this, the stories remain. Even after I tell you about the Grimm brothers and about Arthur Rackham. Who the fuck's that? Well, it says in the book he did the illustrations. I'm just playing the idiot for the effect. Which I don't really need to do because I'm already an idiot. I got the first sentence wrong. This is going really well so far. I got the first sentence wrong. And I repeat myself again. Even after I pop some bubbles and disenchant some lives, even then, the stories remain. Yeah, okay. If you forget everything else I tell you, remember this. Is it that the stories remain? I've already lost my place. Even then, remember this. Alright, okay. It doesn't say the stories remain, but... First, you need to understand that the Grimm brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm, were not simply wandering around Germany trying to collect the best stories they could find from the peasantry. What they were doing had several purposes, much higher, or lower, says in brackets, than that. They were not the kind of folktale collectors we know today. Indeed, again and again, they revisited the stories they collected, changing them to match their vision of a true Germanic utopia where things end happily ever after. The Grimms actually wanted to showcase German stories so as to glorify the greatness of the German popular tradition. It's sounding a bit risky here. As Professor Jack Zipes, a translator of the complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, has put it. And further, they believed by collecting German stories and folk tales, by studying German language and customs, they would be able to have a huge and moral impact on the German people, and from there, the world. Lofty ambitions, eh? Of course, if we think about how that 19th century utopian vision became corrupted by the Nazis less than 100 years later, we have to shudder. I'm not really sure I'm enjoying this fairy tale so far. It's a bit too real. Okay. About the Grimms. The Grimms came from a solidly middle-class background. Who would have thought? They had servants to help with their household chores. Their father was a prosperous lawyer turned district magistrate. Their mother was a daughter of the councilman. There were 9 children, though only 6 survived into adulthood. Of the survivors, Jacob... this is just going to go on forever, isn't it? Yeah, it just goes into their lives, but we want to look at the fairy tales, don't we? Thank you, Jane Yolen, for your brilliant introduction. I'll read it later. So here we go with the first proper story, The Frog King. I'm guessing it's probably about badgers. In old times, when wishing still helped one, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful. Biased much? But the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, which had seen so much, was astonished whenever it shone on her face. The sun itself. Let me just stop you right there. You see, the sun, as far as I'm aware, isn't a sentient being. I could be wrong. I mean, I remember there was some Doctor Who episode I watched years and years ago where they had a sentient sun. It was rubbish. But, yeah, it's just like a big ball of molten shit, gas and shit. And it produces a lot of heat. I don't think it's really sentient, so it's a little bit of a mistake there. Anyway, back to the story. Close by the king's castle lay... No, sorry, I'm reading it wrong. Need to be more professional. Close by the king's castle... I did it wrong again. Close by the king's castle lay a great dark forest, and under an old lime tree in the forest was a well called Hubert. And when the day was very warm, the king's child went out into... Which child? The youngest one? I assume so. It doesn't give names yet, if it does at all. Anyway, the king's child went out into the forest and sat down by the side of a cool fountain. And when she was dull, she took a golden ball and threw it up on high and caught it. Wow. Amazing. I could do that. Where's my golden ball? I do actually have a golden ball that I do throw up in the air and catch sometimes, but I don't have it somewhere. I think it was like originally a Ferrero Rocher, like one of the big Ferrero Rochers you get at Christmas time. Can't remember where I put it though. Anyway, getting distracted. Where was I? Yes. And when she got dull, she took a golden ball and threw it up on high and caught it. And this ball was her favourite plaything. They didn't have video games back then, yeah. Now, it so happened that on one occasion the princess's golden ball did not fall into the little hand which she was holding up for it, But on the ground beyond the and rolled. Reading it wrong again, fuck's sake. Okay, where was I? Now it so happened that on one occasion the princess golden ball did not fall into the little hand which she was holding up for it, but onto the ground beyond and rolled straight into the water. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes, and it vanished, and the well was deep, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. On this she began to cry, and cried louder and louder, and could not be comforted. And as she thus lamented, someone said to her, "What ails thee, the king's daughter? Thou weepest so that even a stone would show pity." She looked round the side from whence the voice came and saw a frog stretching forth its thick, ugly head. That's not very nice. From the water. "Ah, old water splasher, it is thou," she said. "I am weeping for my golden bollocks, which has fallen into the well. Be quiet and do not weep, child," answered the frog. "I can help you, but what wilt thou give me if I bring thy plaything up again?" "What thou wilt have, dear frog," said she, "my clothes, my pearls, my jewels, and even the golden crown which I am wearing." It's very generous. It's not like the rich. The frog answered, "I do not care for thy clothes, thy pearls, thy jewels, or thy golden crown. But if thou wilt love me, and let me be thy companion and playfellow." This is getting into dangerous territory here, Mr. Frog. I think she's a little young, you know. "And sit by thee at thy little table, and eat off thy little golden plate, and drink out of thy little cup." You want to just say, so we sit down and have a meal? For fuck's sake. Simplify it. You're never going to pick up any woman with spouting all this shit, are you? Stupid frog. "And sleep in thy little bed." He's very forward, isn't he? "If thou wilt promise me this, I will go down," I bet you will, "and bring thee thy golden bollocks up again." "Oh yes," she said, "I promise thee." You're a fucking idiot, you know that, you stupid girl. "I promise thee all thou wishest, if thou wilt but bring me my ball back." I suppose it doesn't matter how you say it. Got it wrong, got it mixed up. I'm dyslexic, you know. She, however, thought, how silly the frog was. Does talk. I messed up again. Okay, where was I? "How silly does thy frog talk? He lives in the water with the other frogs and croaks, and can be no companion to any human being." What a bitch. I mean, I know the frog's been a little bit creepy, but alright. Typical female, eh? Joking. Don't actually think. But the frog, when he had received this promise, put his head into the water and sank down, and in a short while came swimming up again with the ball in his mouth and fruit on the grass. Sorry. The king's daughter was delighted to see her pretty plaything once more, and picked it up and ran away with it. "Wait, wait," said the frog, "take me with thee. I can't run as thou canst." I just talk normally. But what did it avail him to scream his croak after her as loudly as he could. She did not listen to it, but ran home and soon forgot the poor frog, who was forced to go back into his well again. That's always the way, isn't it? The next day, when she had seated herself at the table with the king and all the courtiers, the other people that are there, and was eating from her little golden plate, something came creeping splish, splash, splish, splash up the marble staircase, and when it had got to the top, it knocked at the door and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me." Surprised he didn't say open the door for me. Well, I suppose that doesn't make sense. Ignore me. She ran to see who was outside, but when she opened the door, there sat the frog in front of it. Then she slammed the door to in great haste, sat down to dinner again, and was quite frightened. The king saw plainly that her heart was beating violently, and said, "My child, what art thou so afraid of? Is there perchance a giant outside who wants to carry thee away?" "No," she replied. "It is no giant, but a disgusting frog." "What does a frog want with thee?" "Ah, dear father, yesterday I was in the forest sitting by the well, playing with my golden box, and it fell into the water. And because I cried so, the frog brought it out again for me. And because he insisted so on it, I promised him he should be my companion. But I never thought he would be able to come out of his water." What a pillock. "And now he sits out there and wants to come in. And wants to come into me." Oh, I was reading it slightly differently there. I have such a dirty mind. In the meantime, it knocked a second time and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me. Dost thou not know what thou saidst to me yesterday by the cool waters of the fountain? Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me, you prick." Then said the king, "Thou which thou hast promised must thou perform. Go and let him in." She went and opened the door, and the frog got a frog in my throat there. And the frog hopped in and followed her step by step to her chair. There he sat and cried, "Lift me up beside thee." She delayed until at last the king commanded her to do so. When the frog was once on the chair, he wanted to be on the table. And when he was on the table, he said, "Now push thy little golden plate near me that we should eat together." She did this, but it was easy to see that she did not do it willingly. The frog enjoyed what he ate, but almost every mouthful she took choked her. At length, I'm going to take a bit of a break. Are we still going? I think so. Some mint tea. Very nice. Not that anyone asked. At length he said, "I have eaten and I am satisfied. Now I am tired. Carry me into thy little room and make thy little silken bed ready. We will both lie down and sleep together." I'm not sure I like where this is going. The king's daughter began to cry, for she was afraid of the cold frog, which she did not like to touch, and which was now sleeping in her pretty clean little bed. But the king grew angry and said, "He who helped thee when thou wert in trouble ought not afterwards to be despised by thee." So she took hold of the frog with 2 fingers, carried him up the stairs, and put him in a corner. But when she was in bed, he crept to her and said, "I am tired. I want to sleep as well as thou. Lift me up, or I will tell thy father." Then she was terribly angry and took him up and threw him with all her might against the wall. "Now thou wilt be quiet, odious frog," she said. But when he fell down, he was no frog, but a king's son with beautiful kind eyes. Alright. He, by her father's will, was now her dear companion and husband. I take it she's of the right age, yes. That was a quick wedding. Then he told her how he had been bewitched by a wicked witch. These witches are always wicked, aren't they? And how no one could have delivered him from the well but herself, and that tomorrow they would go together into his kingdom. Then they went to sleep. Alright, as you do. When a frog suddenly turns into a boy and you all of a sudden married to him, you just go to sleep, you know? Just go to sleep. That's how it goes. And the next morning when the sun awoke... Now, I have to stop you once again. See, you did the same mistake, as I said earlier. The sun isn't really a sentient life form, as far as I'm aware, so it doesn't really wake. Alright, we'll go along with the narrative. The next morning when the sun awoke them... Oh, I do apologise. I should have read the next word after that. Fucking hell. Awoke them. The sun didn't wake up. The sun woke them up. That makes so much more sense. We have a picture. She took hold of the frog with 2 fingers and carried him up the stairs and put him in a corner. That's not a very nice way to hold it. That looks quite uncomfortable for the frog. Anyway. Where was I? I'll just crease the page. That's not good. Then they went to sleep, and the next morning when the sun awoke them, a carriage came driving up with 8 white horses, which had white ostrich feathers on the head, were harnessed. I kept trying to say harassed for some reason. I think just because I'm thinking of the frog. Anyway. Harnessed with golden chains. That's the horses, not the frog and the girl. That'd be a very different story. Golden chains, and behind stood the young king's servant, faithful Henry. Alright. Faithful Henry had been so unhappy when his master was changed into a frog that he had caused 3 iron bands to be laid round his heart, lest it should burst with grief and sadness. Faithful Henry had been so unhappy when his master was changed into a frog that he had caused 3 iron bands to be laid round his heart, lest it should burst with grief and sadness. That's a bit extreme, isn't it? That sounds very painful and uncomfortable. What, were they just round his chest, or actually in his heart? Did he have surgery to have iron bands on his heart? Maybe I'm not understanding. Maybe it's a lost in translation thing, I don't know. The carriage was to conduct the young king to his kingdom. Faithful Henry helped them both and placed himself behind again, and was full of joy because of this deliverance. And when they had driven a part of the way, the king's son heard a cracking behind him, as if something had broken. So he turned round and cried, "Henry, the carriage is breaking." "No, master, it's not carriage. It's this band from me art. It was put there in great pain when you were a frog and imprisoned in that well." Again and once again, while they were on their way, something cracked, and each time the king's son thought the carriage was breaking, but it was only the bands which were springing from the heart of faithful Henry, because his master was set free and was happy. Okay. Don't quite get that one, to be honest with you. But that was the Frog King, right? The Frog King. That was certainly a story. That much I can say. Oh, got terrible gas. Alright. How long have we been streaming for then? That has been... I can't find the bit. Oh, it's down here. I knew that. 26 minutes. How long does this one go on for then? Oh, this is a very short one. So, this one is called The Giant and the Tailor. A certain... I've already messed up. The first fucking word and I messed up. A certain tailor, who was great at boasting but ill at doing, took it into his head to go abroad for a while. Jesus. Why does my brain do that? It puts words in which aren't there. I hate it. Hates it. I'll just start again. A certain tailor, who was great at boasting but ill at doing, took it into his head to go abroad for a while and look about the world. Finally got the first sentence done. As soon as he could manage it, he left his workshop and wandered on his way over hill and dale, sometimes hither, sometimes thither. Thither? But ever on and on. Once when he was out, he perceived in the blue distance a steep hill, and behind it a tower reaching into the clouds, which rose up out of the wild dark forest. Another forest. "Thunder and lightning," cried the tailor. What is that?" As he was strongly goaded by curiosity, he went boldly towards it. But what made the tailor open his eyes and mouth when he came near it was to see that tower had legs, unlike my streaming career, and leapt in one bound over the steep hill. Oh, right, the tower did. Not the tailor, right, okay. And was now standing as an all-powerful giant before him. Here we go with the old-fashioned talk again. "What does thou want here, thou tiny fly's legs?" cried the giant, with a voice as if it were thundering on every side. The tailor whimpered, "I want just to look about and see if I can earn a bit of bread for myself in this forest." "If that is what thou art after," said the giant, "thou mayst have a place with me. If it must be, why not? The wages shall I receive." Oh no, wait, that's the other person talking. Shit. I read it now. I'll read it again. I'm brilliant at this. "Thou shalt hear what wages thou shalt have. Every year Oh no, it was him talking then. I've confused myself now. "Every year 365 days, and every year 365 days, and when it is a leap year, one more into the bargain. Does that suit thee? All right, said the tailor, and thought in his own mind, a man must cut his coat according to his cloth. I will try to get away as fast as I can. On this, the giant said to him, Go Ragamuffin, that's a funny one. Haven't heard that in a while. Go, little ragamuffin, and fetch me a jug of water. I had not better bring the well itself at once. Oh, there's a bloody frog living in it. And the spring too, asked the boaster, and went with the pitcher to the water. What? The well and the spring too? Growled the giant in his beard, for he was rather clownish and stupid, and began to be afraid. Sounds familiar to someone else I know. That knave is not a fool. He has a wizard in his body. Be on thy guard, old Hans. This is no serving man for thee. When the tailor had brought the water, the giant bade him to go into the forest and cut a couple of blocks of wood and bring them back. Why not the whole forest at once, with one stroke? The whole forest, young and old, with all that is there, both rough and smooth? Asked the little tailor, and went to cut the wood. What? The whole forest, young and old, with all that is there? Read that wrong. Both rough and smooth, and the well and its spring too, growled the credulous giant in his beard, and was still more terrified. The knave can do much more than bake apples, and has a wizard in his body. Be on thy guard, old Hans, this is no serving man for thee. When the tailor had brought the wood, the giant commanded what am I doing? Stop thinking like that. The giant commanded him to shoot 2 or 3 wild boars for supper. Why not rather 1,000 at one shot, and bring them all here? Inquired the boastful tailor. I can read perfectly. What? Cried the timid giant in great terror. Let well alone tonight and lie down to rest. The giant was so terribly alarmed that he could not close his eye all night. Just the one. All right. All night long, for thinking what would be the best way to get rid of this accursed sorcerer of a servant. Doesn't seem that bad. He's offering lots of stuff. Alright. Time brings counsel. The next morning, the giant and the tailor went to the marsh, round which stood a number of willow trees. Then said the giant, Hark thee, tailor, seat thyself on one of the willow branches. I long of all things to see if thou art big enough to bend it down. All at once the tailor was sitting on it, holding his breath and making himself so heavy that the branch bent down. When, however, he was compelling to draw his breath, it hurried him, for unfortunately he had not put his goose in his pocket. Alright. So high into the air. It hurried him so high into the air that he was never seen again, and this to the great delight of the giant. If the tailor has not fallen down again, he must be hovering about the air. And presumably he came crashing down and splattered all over the place. Wouldn't that be nice? Should we read one more? How long does this go on for? No, I think that's it for today. That's story time over. I hope you've enjoyed that, no one. So we've done a wee bit of the old reading. Brilliant at this. Tea's gone cold. And now it's time to do what every other fucker does and play a game. Don't think anyone showed up to the reading, which I kind of expected. But yeah, just thought I'd try it. Don't think I read particularly well. I'm not good at that. I can read better than in my head. I just out loud. I need a bit more practice, I think. Maybe if I do another one of these streams, I might get better at it over time. But that's it for now. Oh, to apologise, I made the audio spike there. So that's that.